to welcome a former boss of mine, two-time NFL Pro Bowl center, Wisconsin Sportscaster Hall of Famer, and longtime voice of the Green Bay Packers, Mr. Larry McCarren. Larry, kind enough to interrupt his vacation here in San Diego to come down memory lane with a former disciple.
Wouldn't miss an opportunity to see you, Pablo.
We kind of skipped past the lead story today. Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather are going to have their presser in L.A. today. Being the pugilist that you are, does a fight like that, will that get your $100 to watch?
I'll tell you what. I think one of the greatest sporting events in the world, and now it's changed somewhat, but one of the greatest sporting events in the world is a heavyweight title fight. To me, that's big-time sports.
It's ironic that you would bring that up, because if you guys could go to the next video, you and I have the distinction, along with Wagner and Greg Cook, we went to the bite fight. Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson. We put down our $600 a person, and we actually sat in the upper...
If I had to do over again, I would have put down more to be closer to the ring, closer to the action. But the real action took place afterwards when there was pops, people thought shots were fired, and Paul and myself are on the floor behind a bar, hoping we weren't injured.
That was a study in how group fear can get scary, because
that
was the first time a casino had ever been closed in Las Vegas.
On a night like that, too, the take had to be enormous, and on a night like that, they shut it down.
Which brings us to a mutual associate, or someone we both know. You played basketball for one...
Steve Fisher.
Take a listen to this soundbite. He retired recently.
I will never, ever second guess. Did I do it too soon? Did I do it? I did it at the right time for me.
You played for Steve Fisher on the South Side of Chicago,
Richie's
High School in Park Forest?
Yes.
What was it like to play for Coach Fisher?
Well, it might have been, Paul, his first job out of Illinois State, his first real deal coaching job. And so he's a young guy. But the thing I remember about Steve is that he was a man from the get-go who could make his point without being a jerk about it. And he could maintain that coach-player relationship, that teacher-pupil relationship, and still coach. And I'm sure he kept it with him all these years. And I thought his closing press conference when he retired, I watched the whole thing. I thought it was outstanding, because here's a guy that, you know, you talk about basketball history, the Fab Five. I mean, that story will never end. And he was part of that, but he made it so clear in that press conference that the highlight of his career was San Diego State. I thought that was really cool.
And I think that speaks to why he is beloved here. You also played for Bart Starr. What was that like?
Bart, Hall of Fame player, Hall of Fame human being. He took that coaching job with zero experience. And actually, he was coaching his best when they let him go, but he had his 8-9 years, but a fine, fine gentleman, as good a human being as you'll ever meet.
Yeah, you probably take it for granted, but for the outside world, Lambeau Field is like holy ground. You've watched that stage. What you got to Green Bay, what, 73 or something like that?
Yes.
So that stadium in 73 as to what it is now is
not a lot of hoopla. 12th round draft choice. Good old try-hard kid out of Illinois.
But you've seen the stadium evolve. Can you speak to...
well, when I got there, the Big Ten stadiums are all like monuments. And you get to Lambeau Field, and I had seen it on TV and the Ice Bowl and everything, and I get there, and from the outside, it kind of looked like an erector set. had great atmosphere inside, but from the outside,
it was nothing special.
And so there came a time in the 90s when they started really to renovate it, and thank heaven they did, because it's enabled the Green Bay Packers to prosper.
Can you relate to the heart, even the thought of, like the Packers are gonna move or something? Can you relate to the heartache, or is it really alien to you what Charger fans are going through right now?
No, actually, Paul, when they were talking about the big renovation for Lambeau Field in the 90s, one of the things, then President Bob Harlan, president of the franchise, Bob Harlan, one of the things he held out there to people, because it was a close vote, one of the things he held up was that we may lose the Green Bay Packers if we don't renovate our stadium. We may not have this team. and it affected people, and thankfully the vote passed by a very close margin.
You mentioned your 12th round pick. You accomplished a great deal, made the most of your abilities.
As limited as they were.
Talk about the change. How has the game evolved in your opinion? What's the biggest difference between now and then?
I think the game continues to get bigger, stronger, and faster because people have the luxury of better physical tools to work with. I don't think technique has come along with the bigger, faster, stronger.
A lot of guys
I think technique has suffered.
Head trauma. Your thoughts about is that the biggest vulnerability going forward for the NFL?
I think it is. The NFL has to be careful about the next generation of players and parents and so forth. But I will say this. I think you have to be just as careful about legislating the violence out of the game. I think it's one of the attractions. It's at the essence of the sport. And so you're riding a fine line. Okay, but you can't cross it to where it's not a violent game anymore because that's a big part of it.
You've had a front row seat for Aaron Rodgers, who until recently would train out here during the offseason.
Sure.
Where does he rank in the best ever conversation?
Well, I may be prejudiced, but I think he's the best I've seen. And I got to watch Brett Favre up close and personal all his years in Green Bay. But the thing about Aaron is he can do all those things. He can make every throw. He's incredibly mobile, and he plays a very cerebral game. He doesn't make the colossal mistake at the end where you go, oh my gosh, what were you thinking? And he's just, he's the reason when you talk about the Green Bay Packers, how they're going to be this year, and I get asked that all the time in Wisconsin. They're going to be good. They're going to be in it at the end, and I think he's the best player at the most important position.
All right, you were talking about fundamentals. We do a high school football show around here.
The PPR, I love it. I love it. I watch it on the internet.
Speak to the young kids. You kind of alluded to the fundamentals haven't progressed with the sport. Can you speak to that a little bit? Is that your message to young kids?
My message to young kids is if they play a sport, whatever it is, or whatever their activity, it doesn't have to be football, but whatever their activity is give it their best. I mean, nobody can ask anything more. Give it your best. And when you prepare or when you practice, do so with a purpose. Go out there with a game plan. Here's what I want to get done today. I think sometimes you get in a routine and you go out there and you just kind of go through emotion, but practice with a purpose, and that way you will get the most out of whatever ability God gave you.
My message to young kids is never, do we have time to show it? Never do this. I guess.
Getting to know you, getting to know more about you, getting to know you, getting to know how you play.
I'm going to play that.
You got a problem with that?
I'm going to play that at the funeral, dude. Larry McCarren, a longtime associate, and
love him.
Overall, good guy to give up beach time to do this. We'll have at 6:45. We're talking California State games, and of course at the All-Star game, we'll talk about that on the All Sports Report.